So, I've been hyping up Hereditary since I saw it at Sundance. I know some people said I hyped it up a little bit too much, but for the most part, you guys have been tweeting at me telling me this thing completely messed me up, which I'm proud of. But for the few who actually didn't like it, which is completely fine, I am legitimately curious what actually scares you, because whatever that movie actually is, I don't want to see it ever in my life. But I will have a video. I already have one. Let me explain for Hereditary. I definitely have one for the A to Z show, because in my opinion, there's two things that a good horror movie should do. The first is it either completely messes up a place, an object, a person, sound, whatever. Like, take Psycho, you know, you go to the bathroom, you take a shower, you're putting soap with your eyes open because you ain't gonna get killed. But the second thing, which is what Hereditary does perfectly, is that it gets into your subconscious. It's obviously dealing with demons, but you know that there's a metaphor in there that gets to your soul and just completely demolishes you. That's the question that I asked you guys on Twitter. What movie either fits one of those two criterias, right? What horror movie completely just messed you up? And I got a couple of good responses. Alina says, does the Scary Maze game count?
See you doing it.
Yes, it does. This is actually in Searching, which is coming out August. Definitely watch that movie because it's my favorite of the year. But I remember playing this game. Because of that, I always look away when I refresh the screen. Alien 100%. That Chestburster scene got me for life. The beautiful thing about this scene, and this is, I'm sure like most people know this, but, and I'll be covering it with probably more of the replies that I get. That entire scene was authentic. Like, nobody except for the person who obviously got the prosthetic in them knew that this thing was gonna burst out. So when it burst out, everyone was just flipping out. It is like, they're actually scared. And I think that one of the best parts about horror movies, because I feel like, you know, comedies need a natural feel to it. There's also, you know, like dramas. Horrors, however, the scarier that it can get, or the scariest it can be, is when it's authentic. And I'll cover it with an upcoming movie. The Blair Witch Project. I live surrounded by a forest. Well, that's not good. Definitely the Blair Witch Project. I was 7 at the time, and my cousins made me believe that all of that was real. That the people in the movie died, and somehow the tape found its way into our local Blockbuster. Needless to say, I had nightmares for a week. See, I had seen it a bit later when I realized that it wasn't true, but we don't get that nowadays. I feel, and I've said this before with parodies, right? By the time a parody makes it to the screen, all those jokes are dated. There's also something with horror where, I'm not saying YouTube or online stuff has replaced it, but there is scarier stuff that you watch on YouTube when you actually think that it's real. The Babadook. I was watching it late at night, so I was asleep for half of it, but I still can't get that monster out of my mind. Babadook clearly falls under the messes with your psyche, your soul. It does have the image of that demon that comes out, but that whole idea of what the monster is supposed to represent definitely goes on the latter part. Candyman messed me up too when I was little. I remember being entraced with that movie that if anyone wanted to play, I straight up left their house. They didn't even care about it. I think Candyman takes place in Chicago, and being Mexican in particular, we have like El Cucuy, we have La Llorona. If you're Mexican, there's usually like a room or a place, or at least a time where certain rooms get haunted, and you do not mess with that. You just run. Candyman was one of those demons or whatever you want to call it, that if anyone was playing that game, if you were of Hispanic descent, Latino descent, you get up and you leave. I remember being scared by Child's Play a bunch growing up because it was always playing on Telemundo or whatever Spanish channel my dad would watch. I couldn't even understand what they were saying, but just seeing Chucky would scare me. If you see any movie on Telemundo or anything like that, there's an extra added level of horror, especially when you're dealing with like a talking doll, because all of it is dubbed and it just makes it scarier.
Hey, pinche niño, vamos a la cama a coger.
Sí, Chucky. Mamá, Chucky me la va a jalar debajo de la cama.
Darkness Falls. I don't know if it was just me because I was a little boy, but I haven't watched it since. I sadly watched it when it was on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, and it doesn't hold up. But this would be a case where I remember watching it in 2003 at a Marcus Cinema. And I remember going to go see the movie, and this messed up darkness for me, like literally. But specifically not like a room when it's stretched in dark, because the movie was about any time that you're going from like a light post to another light post, that area of darkness. The moment you get out of the light, this like demon thing, this I think it was like a ghost, a spirit, swoops you up. So you had to play like hopscotch with light. Dead Silence. First horror movie when I was 9. I couldn't close my bedroom door or turn off the lights for an entire summer. I am still scared of puppets and tongues to this day. To me, this is like the Goosebumps books taken to a whole nother level. For those of you who, if you had like Blockbusters, there's always like that section. You know, for me, it was Child's Play and like Children of the Corn. You wouldn't look at the covers. You would just like zoom right by it. Goosebumps, which I know this is dead science, but Goosebumps had that for me at the library, like the place that you would think you would be safe. I would have to like pass the book specifically for this one. I didn't care about the goo monsters, but every time I saw this guy right here, I wasn't having it. Eraserhead. I don't have a weak stomach, but if you do, this will be more than a horror movie. It will be a horror experience. There's some really great videos out there that analyze Eraserhead, which is extremely hard to do with anything that man makes, but this is one of those weird things where a tip if you're scared of horror movies, like you don't like them, go in there and always remember as you're like freaking out, you know, you just went there and you realize, I don't care if it's a Saturday night, I should have just left my friends hanging. Always remember that it's a movie. Like there's craft services, they go on break. They're probably like they had to learn the script for whatever the movie is, right? And you start like peeling back the fact that all of it is just, it's all just pretend. Movies like Eraserhead make you wonder, how the heck is this a group of people who got together to make this? The Reaping or The Exorcism of Emily Rose, the one with the lead character waking up at 3 a.m. and smelled something was burning. As a college student who stayed up until 3 a.m., the movie scared me so much I had to rush to bed before 3 a.m. to avoid anxiety. Bro, I fall asleep like at 4 a.m. every single day. I fall asleep and the birds are waking up. That's how late it is every single night. Yes. And the craziest part about it, I can't remember what movie specifically I was making a video for, but there is actually 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. is known as like the hour of the dead. That is when the most people die at a hospital or something like that. There's some myth going with it. I deal with that every night. Not considered a horror, but it has to be the Final Destination 3. Oh, actually, I think it is a horror. But because it was the first Final Destination movie I saw as a child, and just the reality of a roller coaster malfunctioning scared the crap out of me. Love roller coasters. I do too. Cedar Point. If you've never been to Cedar Point, you definitely have to go. But I agree. And I think there's another one probably in here. There was a couple that mentioned Final Destination. Not a big fan of horror, but Final Destination made me permanently scared of driving behind trucks and carrying logs. Final Destination is the epitome of that first area of horror that I'm talking about. It ruins everything for you. I love roller coasters. I always think about that. I am that dude who always just thinks back to Lost when I'm about to get on a plane. Same thing when I'm driving. You know, I'm going on a road trip this September as well over the East Coast. And what am I going to see? A bunch of logs. Every time I see logs, all I think is, this is it. Friday the 13th messed me up because I watched it before going to sleepaway camp. And after lights out at 12 p.m. and you know what? This is just... Boy, this is you're worse than me watching the pilot of Lost before a plane. Get Out had me paranoid for a good month. I was asked to stay over at a white friend's house and I declined because of this film. I look back now and see how stupid it was, but was it? There was a couple people who actually said Get Out. Get Out. I was scared of white women for weeks. You are allowed to be scared of whatever you want. There is bad people and ignorant people in every color and every race, but I will say this. White women, if you work in fast food, you know exactly that's the horror, the worst person you can deal with when they ask for the manager. Intruders 1992, I was 10 and the circumstances of the girls, a blonde and a brunette and bikes through vacations in the country, were so similar to me and my cousin that summer, it took me years to stop feeling true fear at random. I have never seen this. I like how this is dubbed in Spanish. Nope. I watch a lot of these things that you guys send me. Not all of them make it into the actual video. That's staying in the video just so you guys can see exactly what the heck just messed up my sleep for tonight. When I was young, 10 years ago, I saw Jaws and was terrified to go to the beach for at least 2 years. Again, this goes in line with like Psycho and stuff like that. I don't even like going to the beach. You could just imagine Jaws is my perfect excuse not to go because, you know.
It's coarse and rough and irritating. And it gets everywhere.
Jeepers Creepers, another one. Going on road trips growing up, I've mentioned this so many times before. Anytime the radio would go out, that's what they do in Jeepers Creepers. That's when he appears. I was always on the road. Couple of quick ones that I see you guys had like compiled. Lights Out got me switching on every single light that I have in my house for several days, like for real. I sing like Amazing Grace when I go downstairs to go get a cup of water. A couple of you had mentioned Martyrs, which I've had so many recommendations, and every recommendation is like, oh, you need to watch it. It's completely terrible. It'll ruin your life. So I might make a Let Me Explain on it. Wes Craven's New Nightmare freaks me out to this day. That's one that I highly recommend. Paranormal Activity, watched it with my brother when I was like 7 and didn't sleep for a week. I'm not the biggest fan of Paranormal Activity, but I remember when this just like swept over everybody at school. It was like a modern day, not modern anymore, but like a modern day version of the Blair Witch Project, where some people thought it was like actual found footage. Poltergeist, first real horror movie I watched as a kid. Still gets me spooked for its static screens. Yeah, they're terrible. It ruins every time I see that. I just go back, and what makes that movie scarier is the fact that I think the little girl actually died, so that doesn't help. Raw was a great movie that had me pretty messed up while watching it, and anytime I think about the movie now, I become really hyper aware of the movements of my bones in my toes and fingers. It's weird. Yeah, that movie it'll turn you into a vegetarian for like a week at least. Wreck. I watched it without subtitles, so I was confused and scared during the whole film. Not a good mix. And the ending with the guy that had super long limbs freaked me out so much that I couldn't watch it. I saw this movie, I think it was in Florida. It wasn't even Wreck, it was Quarantine. And we had to walk back to the hotel, and we were like staying at a beach. And all there was like spiders all around, which looked just like the thing that attacked him at the end. Scary Movie 3, that Michael Jackson scene. Yeah, that'll creep some people out. I watched Screamed when I was 7, and for months I'd see Ghostface everywhere. I had all of my cousins try to put the Ghostface mask on and creep us out. Then they would get punched in the face and then wonder why. I was terrified. He'd poke his head into my room, but at the same time, I loved that movie. That's where the love of Wes Craven came. When I was about 10, I saw Silence of the Lambs, wouldn't go near vans for some... You shouldn't ever go near vans to begin with. The lawnmower scene from Sinister, it still gives me nightmares. Yeah, imagine being Mexican and watching that scene. The Fourth Kind, someone said it. Okay, The Fourth Kind is not a good movie. It is a bad movie, but The Fourth Kind does something. Like I was mentioning earlier, sometimes the stuff you see on YouTube is scarier than anything else because of that idea that it might be real. I remember seeing The Fourth Kind at a drive-in. A drive-in. This is an alien movie, and I don't have a roof over my head. This thing incorporates audio files from the true story, and I don't know why that freaked me out so much to this day. Like listening to horrible audio that's capturing either a murder or supernatural sounds, that freaks me out. And this movie did a fantastic job with that. I think any horror movie that's able to incorporate realness to it, like actual evidence of whatever they're talking about, messes it up. The Conjuring, that clapping scene still creeps me out when I think about it. Yeah, I think that the scariest parts, very scary parts of The Conjuring. Every time I see this though, all I think of is meme review. I liked The Exorcist when I saw it for the first time, but it didn't do much for me. Years later, I rewatched it after having met my younger nephews, and I understood the fear of having an uncontrollable force in your youngsters, damaging not only you, but the kids as well. I had mentioned how I've taught at a school before. They were all possessed. The Ring. Couldn't sleep for 3 days, couldn't watch horror movies or anything remotely creepy for 5 years. I still remember when the Ring was such a big deal. Rings was terrible, but when The Ring was out, everybody would just call other people and say, you got 7 days before you die or something like that. And it was fun doing that. It wasn't fun receiving those calls. The Shining, that dog gimp suit scene will always horrify me. Bravo, Mr. Coop. This looks like that FX series that's out. When I was younger, The Strangers messed me up. I live in the middle of nowhere. That does not help. Now I'm older and I kind of think that movie is just okay. Same. I remember when I first saw The Strangers, it was specifically in the trailer when they do this with the song. Literally, I just have to play that and it scares everyone in my household. Some of the last ones is Unsolved Mysteries, and its theme used to scare the crap out of me as a kid, so when I saw a leaked version of the I've heard of these, the Poughkeepsie tapes, which utilize a true crime format, it shook me. There's one specific home video scene in the movie that still haunts me. I think these are the ones where, let's see, yeah. Hundreds of videotapes of torture, murder, and dismemberment show a killer's decade-long reign of terror, and they're actually from him. You should never watch this. Finally, one of the ones that I got of the horrors that completely messed you up is your channel. I'm glad I have such an effect on you.
Whoopie-dee scoop, scoop-dee-dee whoop. Whoop-de-scoop-de-poop.
Thank you guys for checking out this video. Again, as always, shout out to the patrons for just a month, $1. They support 3 channels, as you can see right here. It's not only the A to Z show, where I have this weekly thing right here, where I get your guys' input on horror movies over on Twitter, but anything really over on Twitter when I ask the weekly question, depending on the release. But also, I have a bunch of stuff over Let Me Explain. I have Hear Me Out. Go watch the March wrap-up. I definitely covered all of those, but it's just a bunch of content, and you can support it all for just $1 a month. Also, shout out to the peeps over at Marcus Theaters, best theaters in the Midwest. You can head on over to the link down below, and every week they're giving out free movies over there to get a chance to win the biggest premiere. But also, they're sponsors of the show, and definitely go like them, follow them on Facebook or Twitter or anything, and that also helps out the show as well. Yeah, I'm curious to know, for those of you specifically who didn't like Hereditary or didn't find it scary, I'm very curious to know what your favorite horror movie is down below. Let me know, because I'm already not getting any sleep.